Chrono Trigger, one of the greatest RPGs of all time. Multiple endings, a sprawling time travel story, unforgettable music, and characters that stuck with us for decades. All packed into just 4 megabytes of data. That's smaller than a single iPhone photo, smaller than a Word document filled with cat memes. Today we're diving deep into how this masterpiece fits into such a tiny space, and why it might be the most efficient game ever made. Chapter 1. The 4 MB limit. First, the basics. The SNES cartridge for Chrono Trigger was 32 megabits, or 4 megabytes. That's the entire game, not just the code. The graphics, the sound, the gameplay systems, all the dialogue, all the endings, and that tear-jerker of a soundtrack. To put it in perspective, 4 MB today might store about 1 minute of an MP3 file, or a single screenshot from a Nintendo Switch game. Compare that to Chrono Trigger, which crammed in an adventure that could last you 40 to 60 hours. Modern games? Call of Duty Warzone clocks in at over 200 GB. If Chrono Trigger were that big, your SNES would need a forklift to load the cartridge. Chapter 2. Code like a wizard. The secret weapon was programming. Chrono Trigger was written in 65C816 assembly language, low-level, ultra-efficient coding that basically speaks directly to the SNES hardware. Unlike modern developers who work with engines and libraries, these programmers had to think bit by bit. A single wasted instruction could mean you couldn't fit an extra animation, or a character theme, or even a boss fight. Think about it this way. Coding today is like writing in English with a full dictionary. Coding for the SNES was like writing a novel using only the alphabet and no spell check. Yet they still delivered a masterpiece. This meant tricks like self-modifying code, memory bank swapping in and out like Tetris blocks, and a ruthless obsession with optimization. It was software wizardry, the kind that makes modern developers sweat just looking at it. Chapter 3. Graphics on a budget. Now, about the visuals. SNES games didn't store giant images the way we think of them. Instead, they used tile-based graphics. These tiles were little building blocks, usually 8x8 or 16x16 pixels, that could be reused across the game. A forest wasn't hundreds of unique trees. It was 1 or 2 tree tiles, duplicated, rotated, recolored, and layered until it looked alive. This is why you'll notice repeating patterns in grass, walls, and water. But in the hands of the Chrono Trigger art team, they transformed those simple tiles into lush, varied worlds that still feel magical today. And they didn't stop at maps. Even enemies often shared sprite parts. Change a palette, stretch an arm, swap a head. Congratulations, you've got a brand new monster without eating more memory. It's not cutting corners, it's making corners look like whole landscapes. Chapter 4. The Music Illusion. Then there's the soundtrack. Yasunari Mitsuda and Nobuo Uematsu created one of the most beloved collections of video game music ever. And here's the kicker, it wasn't stored as giant audio tracks. Instead, the SNES used sequence music. Think of it like digital sheet music. The cartridge didn't hold songs, it held instructions. Play note C4 using instrument 5 for half a beat. The SNES sound chip, the SPC 700, acted like a live orchestra performing the music in real time. That's how you get iconic tracks like Corridors of Time or Frog's theme that sound rich and full, but technically weigh almost nothing in storage. To give you an idea, the entire Chrono Trigger soundtrack, over 60 tracks, fit into a space smaller than a single Spotify song download. Chapter 5. Smart Recycling. Let's talk about time travel. You'd think having 7 different eras would be a storage nightmare, but the developers were clever. Instead of building completely new worlds for each time period, they reused the same maps with subtle changes. This town square in 1000 AD? Strip away the buildings, add some medieval flair, and now it's 600 AD. Push it forward, ruin it with apocalyptic vibes, and boom, it's 2300 AD. The player feels like they're exploring drastically different time periods, but under the hood, it's the same real estate with a new coat of paint. This was more than a memory trick. It also reinforced the theme of history echoing itself. Every era felt connected because it really was. Chapter 6. Compression Magic. But even with all these tricks, they still needed more space. Enter real-time compression. Data on the cartridge was compressed, almost like a zip file. When the SNES needed it, whether a map, sprite, or a piece of dialogue, the system decompressed it on the fly. This meant that more content could live on the cartridge than its raw size should allow. But it also meant that programmers had to balance speed and memory. If the SNES couldn't unzip the data fast enough, you'd notice lag. Chrono Trigger managed to pull it off seamlessly. Behind every battle, every cutscene, there was a silent process of squeeze, unzip, display, happening in milliseconds. Chapter 7. Less is more. What really makes Chrono Trigger special, though, isn't just the technical tricks. It's a philosophy of less is more. There's no filler, no endless grinding required, no fetch 20 wolf pelts side quest. Every moment feels meaningful. Instead of cramming in 200 characters, they gave us 7 and made us care about each of them. Frog's honor, Lucca's heartbreak, Robo's humanity, Magus's redemption, these stories hit harder because they weren't buried under bloat. Even the game's multiple endings work within this philosophy. Rather than a single true ending, you could finish the story in over a dozen ways, depending on your choices and timing. It gave the game infinite replayability without infinite data. It's a masterclass in using constraints to create focus. Chapter 8. The Legacy of 4MB. Here's the irony. Today's games are bigger than ever, but often feel smaller. 100 GB downloads, massive patches, and yet somehow less soul. Emptier. Not much to do. Chrono Trigger fits its heart, humor, and epic scope into 4MB, and people are still talking about it 30 years later. Just imagine that. 4MB worth of legacy. That is something to be proud of, and all the developers should be patting themselves on the back for this one. It proves that creativity isn't about how much space you have, it's about how you use it. Now that's something a lot of developers and studios these days could really use and take note from. You have all these big games, all these big spectacles, you have all of this phenomena, but at the same time the games feel very empty, they feel very and bleak. Oftentimes they have home runs, but a lot of times these 100 GBs and big patches, they don't result in anything meaningful or something that you look for. But Chrono Trigger did it. Chrono Trigger fit into 4MB, and it's still better than most 100 GB games today. Let that sink in. If you enjoyed this breakdown, hit that like button, subscribe for more retro deep dives, and tell us in the comments, what's your favorite moment from Chrono Trigger? Let me know in the comments, we'll be waiting. Thank you so much for watching.